Welcome to the Common Humanity podcast, where we are here to have real human conversations. Today, my guest is Ian McConnell. He is a musician and a ginger, and in my personal opinion, a total badass. But Ian, who would you say you are?
Who would I say I am? Man, today I'm a cereal eater. Today I'm a person who did not plan my morning super well. I I came back, I went and like walked to get coffee to go and figure out I've been doing this thing on social media lately where every Tuesday through Friday I post like a what I call a warm up, which is like a little verse chorus of something, just something I'm thinking about. So I started writing that once I got back, and then I was like, oh no, I'm late for the podcast. I got to eat something or else I'm going to be really cranky on the podcast, and nobody wants to hear that. So today I am somebody who manages his time, I guess, I don't know, maybe not poorly, just like suboptimal time management guy. That's me.
I feel like that's me like 80% of the time.
Absolutely. Man, it's brutal. Like, especially like I have this rule for myself that I break all the time that I have to get out of my bed before I look at my phone. I can't be in my bed and look at my phone, or else I just won't get up. Or like I'll wake up and I'll be like really anxious about what's going on in the world or whatever. But today I broke that, and I break it like probably 3 out of every weekdays.
Yeah, I mean that's like the for me it's don't take the phone to bed because it's hard to fall asleep. But then I'm like, oh, but like someone just messaged me, and then also like that was funny and that was funny. I can't tell you how many times I've like sent the text messages of good night to my boyfriend, and then he's like, "Why are you still awake?" And I'm like, "Real." Like they were entertaining. I was
One thing
lost in the internet.
I always really have, for a long time, have disliked that like people can see if you're online somewhere.
Yeah,
Like I've tried to turn off anywhere that I think about, because I don't want people to think that I'm like, you know, not, I don't want to talk to you or whatever it is. But at the
right.
same time, like I would like to, do my little thing and not be perceived while doing it.
Yeah, 100%. I feel the same way. Um, like because I come from an era before cell phones existed, and people like you actually had to be home and available for people to get a hold of you. And
Mm,
so like as a kid, that was my life. And
yeah.
then come like high school and college, everybody has these fancy cell phones, and I was one of those people like I kept a flip phone as long as humanly possible because I didn't want like I didn't text until I was like, oh god, mid 20s, because
Wow.
I just like I because I refused. I just
Okay. So you were like a
flat
bully.
out, yeah, I just didn't like it. I was like, I don't. I had my phone that you could call me on, but like it did text, but it wasn't like efficient. You had to press every button 3 times to get it to whatever letter,
Yeah.
and it took pictures, but they weren't good. And like everyone else was walking around with smartphones, and I was like, no, I don't want the internet in my pocket. I don't
Mhm.
want it. And then when smartphones became less expensive than flip phones, I was like, all right, I'm a cheap ass and I need to switch. But then like people get mad, right? Like they get mad if they text you and you don't respond right away. And I'm like, I don't like you having like I did not consent to 24 access to the world.
Absolutely.
I never did that.
It takes a while to like I feel the same way. If if I get a text, it's not my problem to deal with it right now. I'll deal with it whenever
Right.
I deal with it. But it takes a while to come around to because there is kind of pressure, and I assume that some of that pressure is from advertising from Apple and or Google or whoever being like, hey, if you don't respond right away, you're a bad friend. You should use our product all the time. Which that's kind of a cynical look, but it would be good marketing on their part. So I just assume that that's happened or whatever. But when did you graduate high school?
2006.
2006. Okay, cool. So you're like very solidly millennial.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
right, like not quite elder millennial, not quite baby millennial, just like
Right.
middle aged millennial.
Totally. I have been kind of noticing I go through phases of only like making TikTok stuff and then
Yeah.
consuming TikTok. I probably consume TikTok for like a month at a time and then take a couple months off. But I've been noting, like, for a while I was like, oh my gosh, I relate way more to like the Gen Z thing than the millennial thing. I'm like I'm on the
Yeah.
edge. I'm 95 baby. So it's not like the edge, but I'm realizing now that that was more wishful thinking, and I'm actually pretty solidly, with the millennials on the way that we
Yeah.
view the world, whatever. I feel like I'm just not as like Gen Z is so, and this is a gross generalization, but they're so motivated. They're so like ready to change things and stuff like that. And I'm just like, this is a system. It's not great, but like, I feel kind of powerless to change it. So I'm just gonna try and exploit it.
Right. Okay. So I think, and since you're a young millennial, I think that part of the problem, we have a very large generation, right? Like it's funny because people still shit on millennials, like, oh, these stupid kids. I'm like, these stupid kids are 40. Like they're not stupid kids anymore. But there's like in general, there's this fatigue that I feel like all humans get. Maybe not all humans.
Mm,
The majority of us get that fatigue of like, yeah, we want to fight, yeah, we want to change, and eventually we're just like, ugh, I
yeah,
just to survive the day, and that hasn't fully hit Gen Z yet. Like
that's true.
they still have that like wide eyed like that doe eyed like the world can be a better place, and it can. I
It
will show
can.
that it can be a better place, but I think you have like probably the hardest part of a millennial because there's so many millennials that got dragged before you even realized it. So by the time like you were an adult, you were just like millennials are pieces of shit. Like right? Like that's like you just grew up knowing that you were a piece of shit because everyone talked about how much you're a piece of shit, whatever.
Mm,
And um so like that was how our generation was talked about your whole life. Like it was only like half my life.
that's
So
fair.
um and I mean, I sometimes, I guess on my optimistic days, I relate a lot more with Gen Z than I do with millennials
Right.
because, like, in my 20s, I was solid, cynic, like, the world could be better, but no one's going to fucking change it. So, like, I just need to live. And I'm just like, you know what? If I can change one person's life at a time, I'm good. Like, that improves the world. And it doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be a grand gesture. So,
I think that's an important mindset shift. I try to say important these days rather than good and bad because I don't know what's good and bad anymore. I grew up with a certain set of values and now I still hold only maybe 30% of those values, which is totally wild. Um, but with millennials too, I wonder how much of it is that like we have been like we've seen so many drastic changes in society
mm-hmm.
while we were young and expected to take advantage of those, but we were unprepared to do that. And so we're just kind of like, oh, now it's like this. Okay, now we got to do everything on the internet. Okay, now we got to use social media. Now we're like the forefront of all of these things. And then it's like, oh, they're messing up, blah, blah, blah. We're just the first people to try it out or whatever it is. And now Gen Z has TikTok and stuff like that. And now people
Yeah.
kind of crap on Gen Z for TikTok. They're like, oh, TikTok is only teenage girls dancing around or
Yeah.
whatever, which is not anymore.
Right. You should, you know, plan your curate your feed a little bit better if that's all you're seeing.
That's
Um,
true.
so my little brother's 14
Yeah.
and he's on Snap and all this stuff. And um, I was like, I shared a story on Snap of like what was happening in my life. Like I did a thing, shared it on my story, and he's like, "Oh my god, you don't even know what Snap is for. Like you don't even know. Like that's not what stories are for." I'm like, "Tell me what the fuck stories are for, please. Tell me." And he was just like, "Oh, you're so old, you don't even understand." I was like, "Do you know who invented Snapchat? Someone my age. Like
Right.
you want to." Like we invented it. You don't tell us how our app is supposed to be because you guys do stupid shit on it that it's just ridiculous.
I think it is
Okay.
it's a funny concept to be like, okay, this is supposed to be used like this when it's specifically like, I mean, it's a tool for communication
Yeah.
that you can use however you want. Like, there are ethics and rules and whatever, but
all of that.
what you're supposed to do on anything. Like you can try something and you could do something different and it could be really popular and then other people can copy you. Or you can do something, it can totally, you fall in your face doing it. But like the supposed to thing is an interesting concept.
I agree. And I think if you take that like fully into life,
Mm,
I anytime someone is just like, well, you were supposed to, I'm like, was I? Because as far as I remember, I have free will. And if I choose to do it, fantastic. And if I choose not to do it, fantastic. Like you don't actually get to decide for me how I am supposed to live.
mm,
And then that ruffles a lot of feathers, but it's also the people who don't do things the way they're supposed to be done are the people who change the world, who are innovative, are the ones that continue like I mean, Google would not exist if somebody did what they were supposed to.
right.
None of our apps would exist if people did what they were supposed to. Like banks wouldn't function the way they do if people did what they were supposed to. Like anything.
Mm.
Um, so somebody's got to be the rebel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is funny how, all of these like, oh, we're gonna praise whoever, Bill Gates. He dropped out of college. He's a dropout, or all these people who like dropped out of whatever. We can praise them, but like we only praise people once they've proven that what they did was a good thing. And
Right.
like we don't praise them for taking the risk until the risk pays off. And most people that risk doesn't pay off, you know.
100%. Which is, I think there's a huge bravery in that. Like, there's anyone who's like, I'm going to start a venture, whether it's a small business, whether it's putting music out on Instagram and being an entertainer in any way, um, all of it. Like, that takes a huge amount of courage and just, I would even say self awareness. Like,
Mm,
that like I don't think anybody goes into that like, oh yeah, like even super confident people, they're not going to be like, I'm taking on this venture and it's going to work out 100% in my favor from the start. I don't. I mean, maybe there are a handful of people who are like ignorant to the real world that think that, but then they'll learn those lessons very quickly.
quickly. There is a certain amount of delusion that is really helpful in terms of like
Oh
I've
yeah.
I've been in Nashville for about 6 years, and I was in like kind of the country industry scene, like the country music industry
Mm-hmm.
scene for like 3 years, really up until the pandemic hit. And there is a very like people coming in. I remember we just watched the Grammys this weekend, and I was talking to my buddies like, do you remember when we watched this in like 2018? And we're like, next year that's gonna be us. No, it wasn't. It was never gonna be us next year. All of these things, you think all these things like happen immediately, and for some people it does. But like, oh, you only hear about like the one or two people that had the overnight success, the one or two people out of the hundreds of thousands pursuing this career that jumped up. And now, now I have such nostalgia for being delusional and not knowing the statistics. Because I'm a very math. I went to school for math
Yeah.
and cello, and I know the statistics, and I'm like, man, as special as I think I am, I don't beat most of the statistics. Most people don't beat most statistics.
Yeah. Oh, so cello, because one of the things I want to ask you, like, how did you get into music?
All right, how did I get into music? Both of my parents are musicians. Can you hear me? Okay, is okay.
Yeah.
Both my parents are musicians. My mom is a piano teacher. And my dad played the cello in school. And they met in music school. Um, and so we had music around the house all the time. My mom taught piano out of our home. So I started taking piano when I was 4, and I started taking cello when I was 9 because I wanted to be. You could either be in orchestra or you could be in creative writing, which is now funny because I do creative writing for a living. But I was in orchestra and played cello, and then kept going with cello and kind of let piano fall by the wayside and all that stuff. And I started like a cover band when I was 12. That was fun. I found my dad's old electric bass, fretless bass under the guest bed, which is super fun to learn how to do that. And I started playing guitar and all that stuff. I put out an album when I was in college under a pseudonym. Mac Russell was my pseudonym. It's a really bad album. If you can find it anywhere, I would recommend a listen. But actually, I don't know if I would. a very short listen. It's not. It's really poorly done. I produced it. I had like an engineer there, but I was like, "Here's we're gonna put this instrument here and this instrument here," and I just didn't know anything about filling out the space or anything like that. So, um,
Really excited to listen to that.
yeah,
I'm gonna find, I
I
will
think I
find
took
it.
it down from most places, but now I almost wish I had it because I took it down at a time when I was like, I need to look really professional. I need to like, give the illusion that I like really know what I'm doing. And now I'm like, actually, my thing is kind of figuring it out as I go. That's like way more of my brand at this point. Um, so it might be on Amazon somewhere. Um,
I mean, I'm gonna look.
cool. How'd I get into music? That's pretty much it. I moved to Nashville right out of college. I spent a summer here right uh, before my senior year of college, um, and then moved here to try and write country music. Was writing things that I was like, this is so cool. I don't think anybody else is going to want to sing this. So if I want it to be released, I have to do it. So I was like, all right, well, I'll start putting stuff out. I don't really know how to produce songs, but I'll learn how to produce things because I'm very thrifty, very frugal guy. I'm like, if I can do it and it can be good enough, then that's what we're gonna do. So started doing that, and then things started kind of taking off, just a little by little, and then pandemic happened, so I started doing TikTok, and then TikTok took on a life of its own. I've had so many different shticks on TikTok. I started out like singing jokes. I would like go for walks and write like 8 or 9 one-liners, and then pick my favorite four and sing them and put them up. And then I did parodies for a while, and then I did this news update every week that was we didn't start the fire, which was super fun, except that after a while I was like, I actually don't have interest in being political, and I don't know how to do this in an unbiased way, and it's just kind of stressing me out. So I stopped doing that, and then put out music last year, and that was good. And then I don't know, I just keep figuring out what do I want to do right now. I'm kind of tired of this past thing that I just did. What am I going to do now? And then every once in a while, something works.
I think that's. I mean, first of all, I think it's beautiful. Just a beautiful way to move through life
Hmm.
is what what is the right now? Like what is actually going to give me joy right now? What is going to because it doesn't always have to be like moving forward. Like
Right.
you don't what not what's going to make me rich right now. It's what's going to make me enjoy existing right now.
Absolutely.
And
I think
yeah,
there's it's both like a superpower and a curse to I don't have a desire to be rich, and I mean I would like to continue to make a living and stuff, but I don't have a desire to be rich, and I don't have a desire to be famous. So to me, like the fame part especially is like kind of an unfortunate byproduct,
mm-hmm.
because like I make stuff that I really believe in, and I love saying these things, and I love exploring being human and all these things, and also I don't really want you to know who I am. I want to like hang out with my friends and like go do this and whatever. And if you love my stuff, that's amazing. But don't look at me.
I honestly I feel the exact same way, and I think that there is. I mean, it almost goes back to like the cell phone thing, being accessible 24 hours a day. But when you reach fame, it's not just your friends and family who think they have 24-hour access to you. It's the entire world, and
Yeah,
that is just way too much. Like I'm an introvert. I don't want to talk to the people I like, much less the people I don't know.
I am too. It's funny to folks have whatever your thought process of what you think an introvert is. Like they're like, oh my gosh, you're like very talkative and friendly, and like you do all these things. Like how could you possibly be an introvert? I'm like, well, I am great at performing in these aspects, and I really enjoy it. And then when I'm done, I am done. I'm, once if I'm at a party and I feel the thing, I'm like, I have about 5 minutes, and then I must leave.
Yeah, your battery goes. Just
Exactly.
like that.
And sometimes you can't feel it until right when it hits.
Yeah.
But there was something
I,
you just said, being accessible and friends and family. Oh, right. Um, yeah, an interesting thing about having a kind of a larger audience now is, especially as things have moved to Instagram, where like my high school and college friends and also my family are all there, as opposed to I used to do kind of everything on TikTok, and it was like you can throw out a piece of yourself to entirely strangers, or you can throw
mm-hmm.
out a piece of yourself to just the people that you know, but combining those and being like, am I willing to share things with strangers that I would usually share with just my family, or am I willing for my family to see what I would usually only share with strangers? That's an interesting hurdle, and that's where I have found, you're talking about being brave. That's where I have found my most lack of courage. And like, do I want my grandmom to know that I think this? And do I want some random person in Wisconsin to know this thing that I only tell my friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will touch a little bit more on that in a moment, but
Okay.
there is, so I'm a poet, and so I released my first book last year, and it's about my journey through trauma and healing. And
Mm.
so I had a couple of family members who were like, "Yeah, I want to support you. I want to buy your book," and I'm just like, "Are you ready for that?" Because
Mm-hmm.
like my family is super Catholic, they're super religious, and they super don't know jack shit about me because
Mm.
I've never let them because
Totally.
it and um there was this quote I saw that I posted like right as my book came out, which was um it was just like when your friends and family want to read what you write and you're like, okay, but you're gonna have to get real cool with a lot of shit real fast.
Exactly.
Like, you're welcome to, but because like for me it's like I know who I am. I know what I've been through. I've already done like I go to therapy. I do what I need to keep me where I need to be.
Mm.
And their reaction to that is not my problem. But
That's
also, I
true.
understand that it could be uncomfortable for them. So then, like, my empathy is just like, you know, like if you need a hug after finding out the things that I've already lived through, then like I'm here for you. But also, like I've already done all my work. So not all my work, still doing the work, always
Yeah.
doing the work. But
Constant.
um but yeah, so that's one of those things where it goes with that. Like it's so much easier to tell a stranger like in-depth things about you because at the end of the day you can walk away from that person and there's no ripple. Like
Right.
in your own life you don't have to feel it. Like you tell your mom that and then she says something and I quote, "Wow, you've got a lot of baggage."
Well, I
I'm like,
mean,
"Thanks mom, you packed it for me."
well, that's good. It is good. Well, good. What is good? It is
Right?
of weight that she recognizes that,
Yeah.
okay, there is a lot going on, as opposed to like, why are you being crazy? Nothing even happened. Like that would be different.
Yeah,
It is,
for sure.
man, the all those. Oh, I had a thing to say, and now I don't have it. That's okay. Maybe I'll think of it.
We'll find it. We'll find it. It'll
Yeah, totally.
but yeah, we were like before we went on, we were talking about this idea of like how much of yourself you actually want to put into the world. And
Absolutely.
can can you be like especially someone who's like I want to be my authentic self, but can I be my authentic self without showing everyone every aspect of me?
Right.
So like and it when you put yourself in the public eye, it's like how much is too much? Like is there too much? Do you like where is the line? And I don't know, have you had that thought in your own head and where have you kind of settled with that at
Yeah,
least
I have constantly had that
today?
thought in my head for about a year. Um, because before that, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna write the best song, and then I'm gonna put out the best song that I have, or whatever. And then I'm like, all right, cool, that's great if you just want to be known for your songs, but like, I would like to tell a story, and I would like to explore what it's like to be me, because I don't, I feel often, as I'm sure many people do, like I'm the only one who feels the way that I feel. And so I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
if I can say this thing that I feel like I'm the only person who feels that way, and other people can relate to that, then I know that I'm not the only person. But at the same time, if I say this and other people are like, that's crazy, I don't know why you would feel that way, but I'm still interested in hearing what you have to say, then I'm like, okay, now I can like appeal to people's empathy and stuff like that. Um, so when it comes to sharing things, I man, like 3 weeks ago, I was gonna. quit music and become an electrician because I was like, this is just too much. I don't know. I don't know if I can handle people looking at me forever. But on my best days, I try and see anything that I say as a like a kind of a postmarked moment in time, as like,
Mhm.
okay, at this time in my life, I felt like this and I felt that this was an important thing to say. That might not be the same thing in 2 weeks. I might be like, I wish I hadn't said that. But also, if I'm somebody who doesn't want to hide from the things that have already happened to me, I would like to deal with them and stuff like that. And I have the platform and ability to bring these things up and perhaps, have other people look at it and be like, okay, this person will deal with his past, like maybe we can deal with our past or whatever. Then I I, I don't know. I don't really see how it hurts me. And so I might as well make something that I find interesting and I feel like I would like to say. Or specifically, I would like to listen to somebody say, and nobody else is, I can't find anyone else who's saying it, so I might as well say it. So I can listen to it and I can entertain myself.
I oh my god, I like especially that end part a lot because um they say that people who can entertain themselves are never bored.
I'm never
Um
bored. I'm
like when
always interested. And my goal in life is to remain interested.
and I think that's beautiful. Like that because there's so many things to be interested in and we cannot like not as one individual human, not as like the human collective, we are never going to understand everything
Right.
ever. So like it is there's infinite things to just dive into. And but yeah, I really love your point. I've said the same thing before. Like I got the courage to write my story and share my story by reading other people's stories and like, oh, other people have been through this. Other
Right.
people have had the same experiences that I thought I was the only one. And then like the more you learn that you're not the only one, like on the one hand, you're like, hey, this is great. I feel way less alone. And in my case, it was like, this is also really shitty because this shouldn't happen to anyone and it's happening to a lot of people. So we
Sure.
should probably do something about that. Um, but then it was just like, if I can share my story, if I can share my thoughts, my feelings, whatever it is, and again, if that helps one person, if one person hears what I have to say and feels less alone or feels connected, um, then it was worth it. It was totally
Totally.
worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's not hurting me to
Right.
share who I am because I'm also pretty solid in who I am. So, I mean, I'm not cool enough on the internet that I have people trolling me very often. Um, but when they do, I'm just like, you don't affect my life. Like,
That's a
my
great
life is here, and your opinion of me is your problem and not mine. So
That's a great outlook. Last year was my first experience with like, well, maybe I guess it's kind of started in 2021, but last year specifically, I was my first experience with kind of trolls or hate comments or whatever, and it wasn't like anything like that was a lot or like constant or whatever. But I was thinking in my head like, the first few times I'm like, I'm really upset by this, and I'm like, I'm really overreacting to this. Why do I care so much? I'm like, I just haven't practiced, on receiving because my whole growing up, like the worst thing that could happen is for you to like either embarrass yourself or embarrass the people around you. That would be
mm,
terrible. So if these people are telling you you're doing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the thing that you're not supposed to do in life. And then after a while, you're like, oh, okay, actually, you kind of get over it. I saw something that said, if you wouldn't ask them for advice, don't worry about what they have to say or whatever.
yeah.
And I was like, all right, I think I could probably do that.
Do you remember any of the things that people like any of the trolls said to you, even if it's just like in general?
Yeah, there was which turned out to be it was really good, which is why I dislike that I handled it so poorly. But this music reviewer, Anthony Fantano, whatever. Anyway, large music reviewer posted some review of my song Friends, and it was just like R.I.P. music. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. Like yada 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 yada. And I was like really hurt by this thing. And then I was like, wow, this got like a couple million views. Like that many people have now heard my song. This is like such a bonus. This is so great. But at the time, I was like, oh, like I can't believe somebody would like go out of their way to do this. I'm like, go out of their way. He's literally a music reviewer. Like, and he's putting my song in front of lots of people. And if you go through the comments, half of them are like, yeah, it sucks. And half of them are like, no, we love it. And I'm like, well, that's kind of nice. I got strangers sticking up for me over here. This is great.
Well, that goes to the idea that no publicity is bad publicity.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I don't think
Yeah.
that, you know, I think there are some things that Louis C.K. probably wishes were not public.
That's fair. I mean, granted that quote and that statement came around before the internet, so there was a lot less publicity when people said that.
That's true.
Um, but so that makes like brings up this idea of like gatekeeping to me. So we
Yeah.
have all of these industries, right?
Hmm.
Um, music, especially being one of them, where they're traditionally, there are people who tell you whether you're good enough to be a musician or not, and then the internet has changed that. And honestly, most of the new music I listen to are all indie artists. They're people who put out their own stuff because one, I think they're way more creative most of the time. Like they actually, it's way more authentic. And music can be so many things. For someone to say this isn't music, like I cannot tell you how long I was one of those people, and I was like, synthesizers are not real instruments, and they annoy me. And I'm still not like a big EDM person. Like I'm never gonna go to a place where it's just like house music. That's not my jam. But there are a couple of people I'm like, wow, they actually use synthesizers really well and like blend it with other sounds and other instruments. I'm like, okay, maybe I was being a little harsh.
Yes,
um,
I get that. I felt the same way. When I was growing up, my dad was like, "Oh, this song doesn't have any real instruments in it, or whatever." For certain songs, I'm like, "Yeah," and that's so bad. I totally don't like this song
yeah.
because of that. I'm like listening to it in my room. It's a great song.
Oh, did you ever have any like albums that like you weren't supposed to be listening to that well whether you got in trouble for them and like caught listening to them or um just anything where your parents would have been like no you don't get to consume that kind of music and then you were like okay I'm going to do it without you knowing.
Yeah, I had like a kind of like a heavy metal screamo phase, like seventh, eighth, ninth grade. And there was this one album that I wanted. I was really into the band Atreyu, and there was this one
Mm-hmm.
album that they put out, and my dad was like, "No, you can't buy that album. You can't listen to that album." So I would just go on YouTube and listen to it there. I also, I didn't tell my parents when I. Nobody tells their parents when they find Eminem. That's like the most like classic 2000s 2010s thing of like, oh my gosh, Eminem says this thing and it's so good and I don't know why I like it so much, but my parents can never know.
Which I find funny. So mine was ludicrous,
Nice.
still on CD, and it was my brother's, and I was playing it, and my parents came home early, and they got mad, and they threw it away. So my older brother was real pissed at me. They got his ludicrous CD taken away. Um, but
Which Lucas CD was it?
oh, I don't know. Let's see, it was like 2000 ish,
Okay.
2001.
Okay.
So relatively like Bodum Bows, that whatever that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool.
I don't know if you can tell, but I'm supremely white.
Hey,
um,
that's good. Everybody, it's funny when people don't want to embrace whatever they just are.
yeah.
And I think, I'm a white person. I have certain sensibilities that come with that culture and whatever.
Yeah. So mine was like I'm a white kid who was raised around a lot of people of color.
Mm.
And so it was a very interesting dynamic in my world because like I ran home every day and watched BET because that's what all my friends did.
Yeah,
And so like
that's
it
cool.
took me a while in my life to realize that like because I was pale I was supposed to be a certain way. I was like, my bad.
Oh,
um
supposed to be.
yeah, supposed to be exactly. But I was a kid and so I hadn't shed that yet.
Right.
But like now, my mom, my mom who's in her 50s, she'll be pissed that I said that, but whatever. Age is just a number. But like she'll be like, "Hey Google, play Eminem," and oh, hopefully Google didn't hear me. Damn it! Don't play
Oh, did it
Eminem,
like
Google.
turn on? That's
Did
funny.
I stopped it? We're good. But it's so funny because like music, she would be so pissed at me for listening to when I was a kid is
Mm.
now what she listens to, and I'm like, Mom, do you know how graphic and just inappropriate this song is? And she's like, but it's such a good song, and I'm like, it's funny.
Yeah.
But then like I don't even know. Like I said, little brother's 14, and then he listens to some things where one of my favorite things to do is, well, honestly, embarrass my little brother, but um, question his actual knowledge. So there's one time I'm driving all of his friends around, and they sing some rap song, which is incredibly vulgar, and I'm just like, do you guys have any idea what they are saying and what this means? They're like, yeah, we totally know. I'm like, okay, explain it to me. And then they say something like, that's not what that means. They're like, well, what does it mean? I'm like, let me tell you. And then they're all just like, oh my God. I'm like, right. And you're singing that. So like, just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Like this wasn't written for 13-year-olds.
That's
So
true, but at the same time, like even if they don't know what it is, like is it a bad thing for them to enjoy it? Like they found something that is enjoyable and that brings them together, kind of like they have like a secret. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we
yeah.
love the thing. We can't let our parents know, but we're all in on this and now we've like created this bond of secrecy with each other."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think that's beautiful and they have a great way to make very good friends.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just, as an older sister, I just like popping his
Yeah.
bubbles sometimes. I'm just like, just so you know. And it's one of those things that's like, this is one of my favorite stories ever. So
Mm,
like my I allow my kids to swear,
mm,
but there's rules around it. They have to know what the word means and like how to use it appropriately and all those sorts of things. They can't
mm,
swear at people, all this stuff. Um, and when my brother was like 12, so a couple years ago, my so let's see, my kid was 5,
mm.
and he came upstairs and he called our dog a twat, and I was like just laughing. I'm like, do you know what that means? He's like, no. I was like, okay, so you don't know what it means, you don't get to use the word. Like you have to know what you're saying. And he's like, well, Cation said it. And I was like, I guarantee you that he doesn't know what that means.
Also doesn't know what I said.
And so then I tell this to my little brother, and he's like, oh yeah, I called her a chihuahua blue. It was so funny. And I was just like, do you know what that means? And he's like, no. Why? So then I told him, and he was like, oh my god. Oh my god, it was so funny.
I came across I thought I knew all the swear words, but I came across that while watching for the first time while watching Easy A with my whole family. And my sister was like, "What did the have you seen Easy A, the movie?" She like
Yeah,
she spells it out in P's or whatever.
yeah.
And my sister was like, "What does that say?" And I was like, you know, twat or whatever." And she was like, "What does that mean?" And my parents were just like, and I was like, I don't know. We'll have to look it up later. we'll, we'll check it out in the dictionary after we're done with this.
You might have to use Urban Dictionary. I'm not sure it's quite made it
I bet it's
into.
in Merriam-Webster.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna have to check after this for
Yeah, I
sure.
bet it is. I bet it is. I feel like words that are used are generally in, you know, those dictionaries.
Yeah, and I guess it's been around long enough. I remember when Bootylicious got added to the dictionary, and I was like,
Oh,
it's a
wow.
it's a real word now. Thank
That's
you,
so interesting.
Beyonce.
Yeah. Huh. Cool.
It's like, so for me, it's yeet, right? Like that is a word that has, I don't know, last 5, 10 years. And at first I was like, it's not a word. Yeet is not a word, but now yeet is a word because that's how words get
Of
created. Is
course.
people say a noise and they give it a definition, and then other people say the same noise with the same intent behind it, and then it's a word.
That is exactly how I think of words. It's so funny. Like, what noise do I make in order to convey this specific meaning to another person? That's so weird. I also feel the same way about like um making words and stuff like that. It's in the last couple of years I've come around to like, did I know what they do? I know what they're saying, because if I know what they're saying and I know what they mean, it doesn't matter if it's a real word or if their grammar was correct or whatever.
Right.
They've gotten their point across or whatever. But every once in a while, there's still something that bothers me, man. If somebody says that they were proud to be a part of something and they say APART, I'm just like, that's not what you mean. That's not what you mean. That's the opposite.
I Oh my god. So there's been a lot of, we'll say, desensitization of grammar being on the internet, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And so, like, I'm one of those people, when I text, I use full words and full sentences and use punctuation, which apparently means I'm a mean person who's always mad at people, but
Right, right.
whatever.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to use more emojis. Um, but then when other people say things, and it's that bias that I have because I was raised by teachers and I was raised with like a very specific grammatically correct way of talking. And so when people don't talk like that or don't type like that, there's like a little twitch in my brain. And it used to be like I was one of those people who would correct people all day long. Like I did not have friends in second grade because people would say, like, I asked them a question and I'm like, did you chop them up? Did you chop them up? Because you asked a question and they're like, don't correct me. So I was that kid when I was 8 and didn't grow out of it for
It's a
a
great,
while.
great way to make friends. People love when you correct their grammar.
Yeah. I was just trying to help them. Oh my God. So,
Yeah, well, you think you're trying to help them.
right.
I feel like I justify it by saying I was trying to help them. But am I really trying to help them, or am I trying to prove that I know a thing that they don't know?
So maybe in adulthood, that's what it would be. As a child, I lived in a world where people were supposed to talk a certain way,
Hmm,
and I was reprimanded if I didn't talk a certain way. So I assumed everybody else had that experience. So
totally.
then, so then my brain is like, I'm just helping them so that they don't have this bad experience that I have. And so, like, as a kid, yes, I thought I was helping people. Um,
It's
as
very
an adult,
altruistic.
right?
I I just don't want you to get in trouble. Like, please say ask, not ask. Like,
um,
it's cute.
but yeah, and then so as an adult, I've had to shed that a little bit. I've had to get to your point of like, if I understand them, I know what they're saying. It doesn't matter if it's grammatically correct. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter if they spelled YOUR or YOU''RE.
Yeah, but it
Like
still
it's
hurts.
still it still hurts. It still hurts. But I don't have to make a big deal out
Absolutely. Do you feel that sometimes I in doing that, in the like doing the mental gymnastics of like, you don't need to correct them, I know what they're saying, yeah, 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 that kind of thought process makes me feel like I'm living less instinctually, like instinctively, you know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm having to like consider all many more things that I do in life rather than just being like, I am alive and this is how I kind of go on autopilot at a certain amount of time. I'm just like, okay, what is actually right? What is a value of mine? Like, does this align with my values before like every little thing? And then it's easy to like kind of get into paralysis of like, I don't know. There's too many things to consider. I just was gonna go to the grocery store. What's up?
of. So I see that point
Mm,
and definitely have those same questions, but then I'm going to counter it
great.
and say, what if it's actually our instincts trying to come back? Because we have a lot of like societal programming of how things are supposed to be, and that's our instincts saying like, you don't have to you don't have to be the second grader who corrects people's grammar because you were taught that that's what you were supposed to do. You can be the person who gives them grace because you understand what they're saying.
Mm,
Because like for me, I think it took until like traveling abroad and trying to understand people in another language and being the person who did not speak the language
Sure.
properly whatsoever, um, to kind of understand that even in English, like the amount of dialects that English has
Oh, yeah.
doesn't make any of them wrong. It's like it's a different language that you have to figure out what they're saying. And if you can understand what they're saying, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
Like there are plenty of people when I would speak Arabic were like, you have no idea what you just said, but I get it. I understand what you're asking, and yes, and like so yeah, I think if you look at it that way as like an entirely different language, for
Mhm.
me it was a lot easier to give them grace of like
Totally.
it doesn't have to be perfect because my version of English is not somebody else's version of English.
Right.
Except if I
Yeah.
speak to an Australian, I have no fucking idea what they're saying.
Yeah, it can be difficult. I find that the Scottish accent is tough for me to understand.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, 100%.
but most of the same words.
Yeah, it's just so I'm from North Dakota, and
Mm.
so very very heavy on the O's. The OU
Mhm.
sound, we say that a lot, and then people are like, "What the fuck did you just say?" And I'm like, "Oh no."
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's so interesting. So now there's just gonna be so much pondering going on in my brain today. So thank you
You're
for giving
welcome.
me things
I
to
love
ponder.
pondering. That's my like favorite part of being alive is just thinking about stuff. It's the bomb.
Like
I've like kind
anything.
of created a career for myself where I just get to think like most of the day. And then when I'm done with thinking, I'm like, all right, I should probably go like hang out with some people. And then I'll go like call a friend, we'll go on a walk. And I'm like, man, this is a great existence. I just gotta sing a little song and then I can keep thinking.
Um, so quick question,
Mhm.
because I'll be completely honest. I came across you on Instagram, and mostly on Instagram, you've got funny little ditties
Mhm.
of which I love. And then I was like, and then you have a tour coming up, which
I do.
when does that start?
April 25th in Chicago. So it's a Midwest and Northeast tour this time around.
Too far away from me.
Well, we'll just have to do some more.
For
This
sure.
is my first time on the road. So it's very like, okay, we're just gonna just like I've done everything else, just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, see what's working, see what's not working. We're gonna have a good time with people who want to come and see me because they, for whatever reason, they want to come and see me. But I am confident in my ability to entertain for an hour and 15 minutes or whatever it is.
I'm confident in that ability for you as
Thank
well.
you.
But yeah, so then I was just like, so I went on like YouTube Music because that's what I use. I can. And then last week was just listening to a whole bunch of like real actual songs that you write. And I was like, oh shit, like he's a funny musician and he's a good musician, like at the same time. Um, do you prefer one of those over the other? Like, do you prefer the full length songs that you actually produce, or do you prefer the little ditties that you make? Like, is there one that just like sparks your joy a little bit more?
It depends on what time I'm doing something. I really enjoy being creative, but what I really don't enjoy is feeling like I have to create in a certain way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so when I did like a lot of those more serious songs and stuff, I did every month I would release a song and I would write it and then I would produce it and mix it and master it all myself and stuff because I was started out trying to save money and then I was like, I don't know, this is what I do now. And I was doing that at the same time that I was on like TikTok and stuff making funny jokes and whatever. And I was trying to like, hey, and I have real music. And people were like, we don't care. We just want to hear your jokes. And then on the music side, I was like, hey, and I have a big social media presence. They're like, we don't really get this. We like your kind of country song. That's a cool song, whatever. And so I was like, what if I combine them? And then once I combined them and it worked in this project called Season One that I did, it was all funnier, full length produced songs and stuff like that. I was like, oh no, now I'm gonna have to make every song that I ever make funny, and I don't want to do that because now I feel like I've been strained and I can't create in the way that I want to, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Even though, probably that's just how I mean, that's just kind of how I express myself anyway, as like everything is like a little bit funny. And isn't this so strange? And also it's so meaningful and deep at the same time. Like we're trying to do all these things. So no, I don't have a favorite. It depends on what what it is I'm trying to say, what it is I'm trying to do in my actual life also. At the time when I was last year, I was making, the longer form things, and I've got more longer form things coming this year as well. But it was very much like, okay, I need to like claw my way up to a point where this artistry is sustainable. And then once I have that, then I can reevaluate what it is that I how I want to make art, how I want to deliver art, and stuff like that. Um, so right now, really enjoying the short things on Instagram, but I also have a live weekly podcast show coming up, that we're about to start recording, and so that will be another way to be creative and see how that goes. And then we have this tour, and the live show will be another way, and so just trying to find lots of ways to create and experience in different forms.
I like that a lot. I think there's so much like information out there that's just like you need to niche down, you need to find your audience, you need and then curate to that audience.
Mm,
And I feel like that takes a lot of joy out of who we are as people.
it
And
certainly can.
like, yeah, and like because if you're only sharing that one piece of you, it kind of goes back to our conversation from before, like how much do you share with people?
Mhm.
But if you if you feel like writing a short funny ditty, like there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to share that with people. And if it doesn't fall, like if they don't like it, whatever, you still got to be you.
Right.
And then yeah, I just think and the idea of finding all these different pieces to be creative or do the things that you enjoy. I think that is like probably the key to happiness in life and the key to fulfillment is just to find different ways to enjoy your experience on this earth. And if you can make your entire existence enjoying your experience on earth, then you win. And
That's the hope.
anyone who's doubting you or says you're doing it wrong can, you know,
They can think that, and that's
they
totally
can
fine.
do what they
And
want.
it might be something that brings them joy. Perhaps it brings them joy to feel like they got it right and the people around them got
Mm-hmm.
it wrong. And who am I to say that that is a wrong way for them to experience joy?
Yeah.
Why
I
not?
think it goes, you've mentioned it a couple times, like there's no good and bad. Like you don't get to define what is good and bad because it's good and bad is different to everybody.
It is.
But it is, I mean, it is what it is. And you roll with the punches and you do what you enjoy. You do what, um, lets you enjoy your experience on Earth.
Sure.
And, you know, as
Yeah.
long as there's always the part of like, you can do whatever you want as long as you're not harming others.
Right.
Um, and that for some people, there's gray area there, but
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
people
There
have
is as long as you're not harming others, even that is that's a specific moral matrix that, like,
right.
okay, we as a society or whatever have decided that if it is good, it does not harm others, and like that's something. Whereas like Genghis Khan probably was not like, I'm doing a bad thing by killing everybody in this village. Personally, I
Right.
subscribe to the set of values that says, treat your neighbor as yourself, all that kind of stuff. I think that that's a great way to run a society where everybody kind of gets to do whatever they're they feel like they can add to the world in that way and stuff like that. But even that, and I've gotten into some arguments over, okay, well, but that person is evil, right? I'm like, I mean, that person probably just had a different set of morals that they were trying to do. They might have taken advantage of some things. They might have known that some things that they were doing were maybe not what they wanted to do originally, but everybody can justify themselves to themselves
Mm-hmm.
for the most part.
Right.
So
Yeah,
no, I
for
don't
sure.
think
And
anybody thinks they're evil.
Well, and that's like, okay, so I um what's the word I'm looking for? Come on, brain, do your job. Um I identify better with villains than I do with heroes, like
Mm,
in movies, because I'm just
yeah.
like, yeah, like, and villains always have a better backstory.
Yes.
Their backstory is always way better than the hero, because the hero is like it's all the pretty shiny things, and the villains are always like, I became this person because,
Right.
and like they were like, no one's born inherently evil. Like everyone becomes who they are through their experience, and they also then I also love when villains get their redemption arc, because
Mhm.
no one is inherently evil, no one is inherently bad, and they always have the opportunity to learn from what they've done. So like it's this idea that once you know better, do better.
Mhm.
So if you have someone who will just, I'm not going to use any specific example, but you know, they're generally seen as like a bad dude. Like
Right.
they were a bad dude until they were 30, and they, you know, they had a bad impact on other people, but then they turned 30 and they were like, oh, probably shouldn't have done that. And then they change, then they're not a bad person,
Sure.
because good people do bad things all the time.
Yeah. Well, people,
Maybe not all the
even
time, but
like the concept of good people, like
right.
you just people are people, and we make our decisions based off chemicals and electrical signals and all these things, and the way that we're socialized and our genetic makeup and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things all together, and whether or not we feel like we're marginalized, and whether or not we feel like we can do no wrong. If somebody's like, if we've only ever been praised, then we're like, we anything that we do is great, whatever. And like there's so many factors that we just can't understand about any individual human, which is why I find it so fascinating. I have been going to therapy. You mentioned therapy. I've been going to therapy for almost 2 years, and it's just like my favorite class ever, because I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have this like human subject that I can just study all the time and be like, okay, I can kind of see how this sequence of events may have led to this tendency that I have to want to, hide away at certain times, or want to, if somebody tells me they have a problem, my impulse is to try and fix it for them, or whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, but I wouldn't want to do this. I would, if I were telling someone else this, I wouldn't want them to try to fix it. So I could try not to do that, but I also understand why it is that I do that and stuff like that. Um, so it's just, man, humans are cool. We're just animals who
Yeah,
somehow, we've learned to be rational, which is super cool. But we've learned to be rational, but the rationality doesn't really control us as much as we think it does.
right. I would, in my experience, I think like for me, the rationality is actually like a big layer of armor from the actual world of like having to actually experience the world as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So my brain's like, okay, we're gonna rationalize that because it's a lot more comfortable to know why than to feel. Just feeling is hard.
Feeling is hard, but it is really, I mean, like I feel the most I feel the
Yeah,
most alive when I'm feeling something, even if it's
yeah,
like, I'm super annoyed about something. I'm like, I'm just gonna live in this annoyance for a minute, because if I don't, then it's just gonna keep coming back. So I'm just like gonna go for a walk for a while and just like, man, I can't believe it, these people are like this or whatever. And then I come back, I'm like, cool, kind of got out of my system, I don't really care anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Um, there was a thought in my brain. It flittered away.
Yeah.
Oh
I
well.
want to go back real quick to something you said maybe 10 minutes ago about posting things and kind of finding your niche on the internet.
Hmm.
I've had several different viewpoints on this. I think so. I like to see social media. I enjoy it best when I see it as a game, and it's like, okay, the goal is to receive the most amount of attention that you can receive, or whatever, or get the most amount of watch time, or whatever it is. So in order to do that, we are going to create, you know, weapons, ammo that are going to, best and most efficiently draw in these people or whatever. And to start out, that is kind of, okay, let's look around for an open hole and let's find that niche. And maybe it's a gimmick that you do, maybe not. But then once things start going, you're like, okay, now I have some people who are interested in what I have to say next. And then you can kind of start expanding and be like, does this work? Does this work? Whatever. And at some point, uh, they're like the way that I use social media now, it's I recognize that there is a specific niche that I can fill very well, but I just don't want to do that all the time. I'm willing to come
Mhm.
back to it and people will enjoy it when I do that, but there are other things I have to say also. And regardless of whether or not this is going to blow up online, this is, I gained this audience in order to show them what I have to say. So you can kind of do whatever with that. And I think that it's fun. And I think there's so many ways to do it. And it's so fascinating to see how different people have approached TikTok or even YouTube, that kind of thing. Because it's just like this entirely new culture that has popped up in the last 20 years. And it's amazing to be a part of this time.
This is a totally random question. You
Yeah.
said YouTube. Have you seen End of the World on YouTube?
End of the world?
End of the World.
Uh-uh.
Okay, so you're not you're not. I mean, I know you're not as old of a millennial as me, but that was like one of the first YouTube videos that I ever like watched. And that was before like cat videos were a thing all the time, or whatever, all of those other things. So you should look it up. It's like a minute and a half long. It's funny. All of
Okay.
us older millennials, we definitely quote it a lot. But
I think the
I
first
just
thing
wanted to get like the vibe of like how old am I? So
I think the first thing I saw on YouTube was Charlie the Unicorn.
I
Do you remember
remember
Charlie?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are going to transition into our game real quick.
Great.
So
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more random.
Great.
So our first question: if you won $2 million in a lottery, how would you spend
Sparingly.
it?
I'm a big saver. I'm like, what do I need to live? That's what I'll do. And like, if there's something that I'm like, oh, I would really like that, then I will, figure out, can I afford that? Get that or whatever. But I think I'd probably travel around a bunch and just keep making art from different places. Maybe I would use the funds slash notoriety to get into conversations with people that I admire and I want to like hear their perspective on things and whatever. Um, but generally, I'd probably just live off of it. That'd be great. That'd be great. If you don't have to make money, especially like as I've now kind of transitioned into making money from my art, I'm kind of like, I actually kind of wish that I would like to keep making money from something else so I don't make the
Mhm.
art in order to make the money because that affects the way that you create and all that kind of stuff. So I
Yeah.
think that's what I would do.
My answer is almost identical, except first I would pay off all of my debt
Totally. Yeah.
because then I don't have debt. It's way easier. Then I'd probably put a good chunk in like investments so that it's there and it's sitting and it's growing and it's doing what it needs to do. And then I would just travel and
Yeah.
go where I want to go and be who I want to be, where I want to be on that day. I've always wanted to, I've always wanted to travel the world. Like one of my goals is to step foot on every continent, but
Cool.
I've always wanted to actually like go live somewhere
Mm-hmm.
for, it doesn't have to be a long time. But like go to Spain and like get a job at a local cafe and just like make enough money to pay for my little studio apartment so I can enjoy and experience Spain for a while and then do the same thing in Amsterdam and in like wherever I want to go. So
Yeah. I also have that fantasy of like going places and living there for months at a time and stuff like that. Are you a particularly like are you comfortable being alone?
100%. I actually prefer it.
I kind of prefer it too. And I think that's a big part of because I have some friends that were like, oh no, I wouldn't want to do that because like where would I like my community or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, I always kind of feel like I kind of drift in and out of communities as time goes
Well,
on.
so I do that, but also I have, and maybe this is like a more recent thing that I've done, but I have a tendency to create community wherever I go. Like
Okay.
I I will talk to strangers if
Mm-hmm.
they like. I mean, I created this podcast because I was like, I want to have more conversations with people, and I've kind of like talked my friends' ears off. So I'm gonna find more people to have conversations
There you go.
with. And we are a worldwide world, like
Yeah.
we can reach anybody. So um yeah, so I just, and community could be one person, it could be two people, it could be fucking army if you want it to be, but um like it's just the idea of like going going to the same coffee shop at the same time, and there's one other regular there and you can smile at them and you can ask how their day is, like that's community. And
Mhm.
that's enough to like feel connected to humanity a little bit. And
Right.
so, and I feel like I I don't I don't know that I'm really great at like maintaining communities. Like I like to start little communities and then let them be, and like I'll pop in and be like, "Hey, how's it going, guys? Like miss you, like want to catch up with you." But I don't want like one community for eternity because
Right.
I don't know, because
Yeah.
I get bored
Totally.
and
Totally.
I want to learn new things.
People are lovely, but it feels limiting to do that. And also like it kind of feels like putting all your eggs in one basket. Like, well, what if
Yeah,
what if we all kind of change beyond where we interact well together anymore or whatever, and like then you're stuck without anybody, and like, oh, I haven't
yeah,
had a new friend in a while, so now I don't know if I can do it or whatever. You can. It's not like
yeah,
crazy, but
yeah.
yeah.
I think I hate the word can't.
Yeah, right.
Um, and most people are like, I can't do that. I'm like, no, you won't do that, and
You
it's
will.
okay. Like it's one of those things where it's that self awareness of knowing that you won't do it. Like there's something that's holding you back from it, but it's not that it's impossible. It's that you haven't reached whatever point you need to cross that comfort zone,
The tipping
and that's,
point. Oh,
yeah. And maybe you will someday, and maybe you won't, but there you have a lot of power over that.
yeah. All to me, decisions are all based off of some balance, and once a certain level goes
Mm-hmm.
here, if the it's a long lever but the fulcrum is over here or whatever, and it has to, you got to get a lot of weight on this side in order to raise the other side of the lever. You're like, no, okay, all right, now we'll really go for it. Now the relationship has become toxic. Now the
Yeah,
career is not what I want anymore. Now I don't want to live in this place, whatever it is. But those are big decisions because they are difficult, especially like if it were just straight up balance, you're like, I'd have to make
yeah,
a decision, whatever. But usually there's a lot of things. It's like, okay, it's way more convenient to stay over here, even though I kind of want this. Okay, I really want this. Okay, I must have this. All right, fine.
yeah.
Now we'll do the difficult thing. Yeah.
100%. I also love how nerdily you explain that. It
I'm a big
it makes
math
my heart
physics. I
happy.
love I love yeah. I see, that's just how I see things. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay. Question two: if you could travel back in time and stay for 5 days only, where would you go and why?
Hmm. If I could travel back in time and stay for 5 days only. Wow, there's so many cool options. I think it would be cool to be a hunter gatherer for 5 days. Go like
Okay.
way, way back and just like, somehow understand. Obviously, I in my scenario, I have the skills in order to do this,
Yes.
but go back and be and understand what it's like to either run after an animal, or just like, okay, we just have to find food today or we're going to die. We have to find a place where we can protect ourselves while we're in our fugue state for 8 hours so that we don't get eaten by something. um I think that would be super fascinating.
I like that a lot because also you likely won't starve in 5 days. So
That's
if
true.
you're
That's
bad at it, if you're bad at it, like you're probably still gonna be all right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think I always say like I'd go back to like my ancestors and like go hang out with the Vikings and just kind of like I would want to be there for like a pagan ceremony of some sort,
Yeah.
and um, like there's part of me that's just like I'd love to go on a battlefield with other Vikings. That'd be really cool. Except I have so if I had like if I got to go back and like magically had the skills, I would 100% like storm a battlefield with a battle axe and a sword and a shield and like all of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but if I don't have the skills, I would stay back at camp and learn from like the medicine women and things like that, and
Totally.
um, be a little safer than yeah destroying people on the battlefield. But that's always like my brain is always like Valkyrie. That's what I want
Yeah.
to know.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Our last question.
Okay.
In what ways do you think humanity has improved in the last decade?
I think our empathy has really, really gone up with our ability to see how so many people in the world live at any given time. Um, I mean, I know mine has certainly, and part of that I'm sure is just growing up. But like, you can watch a TikTok of somebody who's a young mother describing what that's like. You can watch a TikTok of somebody who's in India describing what that's like. You can kind of follow along with stories of people who live in completely different cultures and have different upbringings and have different sets of values than you do, and being like, oh, okay, all right. There's like a lot of ways to do this, especially
Mm,
I come from a place, growing up religious or just whatever it is, some combination of factors where it's like this is the way to live, and if you don't live this way, then that's like not really the right way to live. And kind of coming around to like, oh, actually, there's like a lot of ways to skin a cat.
yeah.
I think that is how we've improved in lots of ways, I think, but certainly food. We have a lot of food.
Yeah.
We kind of we beat the game on food. That was like our main problem forever. We've almost beaten the game on disease. That's like our other main problem.
That
How
I
we're
mean,
so good at beating the game that we have too many people.
it's so true.
Yeah.
Like, and it's okay. On that note, I was reading something yesterday about like um how the population is set to go down in America because the birth rate is for the first time lower than the death rate, and all these people are
Yeah.
like, it's a tragedy, and I'm like, we have 8 billion people on this planet. It is not a tragedy. Like it's okay. We're
Yeah.
gonna be all right. like, like maybe if we get to a point, but really, it's about time that like the article I was reading was just like, and there's less teen pregnancy, and there's this, and I'm like, that's not a bad thing. Like,
Yeah. It will be it is a cultural adjustment, which
yeah,
I think will come with unforeseen side effects. That's kind of how I've been seeing a lot of things. Like the internet, it's brought us all together. The unforeseen side effect of misinformation is pretty massive, and we did not see that coming.
yeah, for
Maybe
sure.
somebody did, and they were like, "Hey, everybody's gonna lie all the time," and I'm like, you know. But now we're like,
Yeah,
"Oh my gosh, people lie all the time. Who do I even trust? I don't know."
yourself. That's it. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah,
If you trust
yeah,
yourself, it doesn't matter if you trust anybody else.
yeah,
So I think for me, the way that humanity has improved is I feel like we're getting more vulnerable, which I
hmm
think is imperative to like collective healing and destigmatizing mental health, and people are more willing people are more willing to go to therapy. We're still working on people being able to go to therapy, but
right.
it's coming, and it's work is happening for that. um and then just this idea that like it's okay to feel,
Mhm.
and like in school there are kids who are learning how to um like they're learning social emotional learning, so they have someone finally teaching them like in grade school what emotions are like, how to interact with people, like those sorts of things, and like problem solving in that sense, which is something I did not get. And like teaching coping skills to kids as they're developing so that they have them when they become adults. And so maybe they have to go through a few less years of therapy because they don't have to unlearn as much because they were taught how to handle their problems instead of just like avoiding them
Don't have.
until
Yeah.
they reach their tipping point,
Oh, oh yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a big improvement that's happened over the last decade.
Sweet.
All right, so before we end this, do you is if there's one thing that you want to say to the world that you want people to hear in this moment in time, what is it?
Go outside. It's good. It's good. You feel a lot better. Even if it's cold, bundle up, go outside, look at the sun, and be like, don't stare at it, but take a peek. It's good.
Awesome. I like it. So,
Uh-huh.
this has been the Common Humanity podcast where we're here to have real human conversations. And thank you very much for joining me.
You it. Thank you for having me.